for video. So we finally have the PlayStation Vue Jailbreak has been released now for the PlayStation 4 by Earth Onion. There's a whole team of other people also behind this, which I will credit at the end here. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to get this set up, of course, because of course we can now jailbreak up to 13.0 with this exploit. But the other benefit is that you can also use this to jailbreak without requiring a disk drive either. So people without a functioning disk drive will now be able to jailbreak their consoles. Now it's important to note before we get started, the general TLDR with this at the moment is that it is quite unstable with the poopsploit, which is for jailbreaking 12.50, 12.52 and 13.0, but it also includes the lapse kernel exploit for jailbreaking up to 12.02. So if you're on 12.02 or below and you don't have a functioning disk drive, then I would definitely recommend setting this up, because it is very stable up to firmware 12.02. So first of all, we need to make sure that our PS4 is on a jailbreakable firmware by heading into the settings and going to system information. You can see I'm on system software version 12.52. So you can jailbreak your console with this up to 13.00, 13.0 or below. So if you're on a console that hasn't been jailbroken in the past, then you'll need to restore the backup file to get this jailbreak set up. Now, restoring somebody else's backup will reset your console, so you'll lose your installed applications, save data, screenshots and video clips and all of that stuff. So if you don't want to lose that permanently, you'll want to make a backup of your own system before restoring the backup that contains the jailbreak. So to do that, you're going to want to plug in a USB storage device like an external hard drive or large USB drive, head over to your settings and then scroll down to your system settings, and then go down to backup and restore, and then select the option to back up your PS4 and just say yes to back everything up. And then you can change what applications you want to back up. So you can deselect any applications that you don't want backed up to give enough room to create the backup file, but make sure you back up your save data, captures, themes, settings, all of that, and then click next and press X to back up your PS4. So once the backup is complete, you can plug the USB drive back into your computer, and you'll see this PS4 folder on the root of the drive, and you can just drag and drop this and copy this somewhere safe on your computer for safekeeping, so that you can always restore this backup at some point in the future to get all of your stuff back so that you do not lose it permanently. So there we go, we now have that backed up on my computer. So now I can delete the PS4 folder from the USB drive. What we need to do on the computer now is simply take the PlayStation Vue system backup file, open this up in WinRAR or 7-zip, and extract the PS4 folder to the root of your USB drive. And once we have that copied over, we then want to take whatever payload we want to run with PlayStation Vue, which is either going to be Gold Hen or Hen, depending on what firmware you're on. I would say use Gold Hen. So you can go ahead and extract Gold Hen to the root of your USB drive here. And if you're on 13.0, use the open source version of Hen instead, which is what I'll go ahead and use here. So we just drag and drop that over to the root of our USB drive and then rename it to payload.bin. Also make sure you go to View, Show, File Name Extensions, make sure that is ticked so that you can make sure that the payload is named correctly as payload.bin. And that is how we want to have our USB drive structured. So that's all you really need there for the backup method. So you can now unplug that USB drive, plug it back into your PS4, and then simply restore the backup file by going back to the settings, going to System, and then going to backup and restore, and this time selecting the restore option, and you'll see the PlayStation Vue 1.2 version showing up there. We're going to restore that backup file and wait for that to restore. And once it's restored and you're booted back into the home page, you should see the PlayStation Vue application showing up there, and you can run that to jailbreak your console. So that's how you get the jailbreak set up if you are using the backup and restore method. It is by far the easiest option. However, if you're going from a previous jailbreak, like the Blu-ray jailbreak, to switch to using the PlayStation Vue jailbreak, you don't have to restore the backup file and reset your console. You can install things manually. So I'll briefly show you how to do that here if you're going to use the manual installation method. So first of all, you need a USB drive again that's formatted in exFAT format. This time we download the manual setup 7-zip file from the exploit. We open this up, go into the manual setup here, copy over the download 0.dat file over to your computer. So it is right there. And then also we want the save.zip. If we open this up, we have a PS4 folder that we're going to extract into the root of our USB drive. And then also we want to open up the PlayStation Vue zip file here, which will be left in the video description. This contains the PSVue application, and the 1.24 update that's needed for it. So we're going to go ahead and copy that to the root of our USB drive. And then if you don't already have the Apollo save tool on your jailbroken PS4, then you're going to want to go ahead and download that and copy that also to the root of the USB drive. I'll leave a link to it in the video description, but you can get it, of course, from the Homebrew store. And then last but not least, again, you're going to want your Gold Hen or Homebrew enabler payload as well on the root of the USB drive, again, renamed to payload.bin. And that is essentially the setup that you're going to want to have for the manual installation. So now we can unplug that USB drive and plug it into the PS4. And on the PS4, you're going to want to load up your normal jailbreak, your previous jailbreak, so that you have Gold Hen running. Then we can go into the debug settings, package installer. You can install the Apollo save tool if you don't already have it installed. And then, of course, install the PlayStation Vue application here. Go ahead and install the package, and then also the 1.24 update package for the PlayStation Vue application. And that should be it there. You can see we now have PlayStation Vue installed. But we also still need to get the exploit and the save file installed. So we're going to run the Apollo save tool. And with the Apollo save tool, you're going to want to go to user tools and go to activate PS4 accounts, and just make sure that the account that you're signed into is an activated account and that the account ID is not full of zeros, because if it's all zeros, then the account is not activated and you'll have to select the account and activate it here. So make sure you're signed into an activated account. And if you are, then you should be good to go with the next step, which of course is to simply head over to USB saves and then take this application data, select it with X, and then simply copy save game to HDD, select that option, and that will copy the save file over. And that will get you set up there. Now, the last thing we need to do is actually get the exploit file installed. So make sure that you have the FTP server running in your server settings in Gold Hen, as you can see there. I'll just toggle it on and off again to see my IP address and open up an FTP client on my computer like FileZilla, enter the IP address of my PS4 in the host box, which was 99, and then the port number as 2121, quick connect to remotely connect to my console. And then from here, we can simply go into the user folder and then the download folder, CUSA00960, which is PlayStation Vue. And then, of course, we're going to take the download0.dat file from the exploit and copy it in here and overwrite the existing file. And that's basically it. If we go to successful transfers, we can see it has been successfully copied over. And that's it. We now have the PlayStation Vue jailbreak set up and ready to go. And that is the manual installation. Okay, so I've rebooted my PS4, so I'm not running the jailbreak. So we can now use the PlayStation Vue application to jailbreak the console, whether you restored the backup file to get this installed on a retail console, or whether you installed it manually from a previous jailbreak. So let's go ahead and try and jailbreak our console now using PlayStation Vue. So I'm going to press X to run the application, and we will get a prompt here. So this service requires a PlayStation Network. You can just click OK to this message. You do need a network connection on your console. I should have mentioned that. So if you go into settings, make sure that you are connected to your network. Just make sure that when you set up your internet connection, select whatever method you normally use and use a custom setup, and then select automatic for everything apart from DNS settings, set a manual DNS and set the primary DNS to 62.210.38.117. And then you can simply click next and do automatic for everything else to get the internet settings updated. And that's because that DNS server will block system updates from being downloaded onto the console. So you need to be connected to your local network to be able to use this. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. So here we have the actual jailbreak menu, which has some pretty interesting options. But first of all, we're going to just run the jailbreak by selecting jailbreak here. It should auto detect what firmware we're on and then load the appropriate exploit for that firmware, which of course for me is the poopsploit, which is less stable. So don't know if this will be successful. We'll have to see. Okay, and there we go. That was successful. We have Gold Hen successfully running there using the poopsploit ran from PlayStation Vue. Now, a few things to mention here. First of all, the lapse kernel exploit is a lot more stable. So if you're on 12.02 or lower, This exploit is a fantastic option. I would definitely switch to this over the Blu-ray exploit if you're using the lapsed kernel exploit, if you're on 12.02 or lower basically. If you're on a firmware like 12.50, 12.52 or 13.0, then the poopsploit is pretty unstable, it seems, with this exploit. That is made very clear by the developers who released this. They're not hiding that fact. It is pretty unstable with the poopsploit on 12.50, 12.52 and 13.0. But anyway, as you can see, we have successfully got up and running with the jailbreak, but it did take me quite a few attempts to get it going. So a couple of things you can do post jailbreak. Once you have the jailbreak set up and running with the PlayStation Vue application, first of all, it's recommended, I noticed this in the release, it's recommended to plug a USB drive into your console and then go to Application Save Data Management, save data in system storage, copy to USB storage device, and copy the PlayStation Vue application data, the save data for the PlayStation Vue application, copy the encrypted version to your USB drive just like that, and keep that safe on the USB, because apparently sometimes an issue can happen when you load the PlayStation Vue application where I guess the save gets corrupted or gets overwritten somehow, and you can lose access to the exploit. So if that happens, then you want to have that save file copied over to your USB, so you can always copy it back from the USB back to the internal storage if it gets removed at some point. So if that happens, you'll have, a workaround to resolve that issue. So that's one thing. The other thing is that when you load the PlayStation Vue application, as you can see here, if we go ahead and load this, we get this initial pop-up message that says the service requires you to sign into PlayStation Network, and you can just click OK and ignore that message and it still loads fine. However, you can actually remove that message completely by using the fake sign-in payload that was recently released. So if we go into the payload menu here, once we're jailbroken, once we have the jailbreak running, we can run the elf loader. So if we select that option, there we go, serving elf loader on the console's IP address on port 9021. And that means I can send a payload over the network to execute on the console. So if I switch over to my computer once more, I can load up a payload injector like netcat GUI, and then take the fake sign-in payload for PS4, which I'll leave linked in the video description. It's also one of Earth Onion's repos. So I can go ahead and copy this payload inside. So there we go, we've got the IP address of the PS4, port 9021, and I can inject payload, and when I click inject payload, you can see there that it gets executed on the console. So there we go, sign in, ready, reboot to apply, and I can simply reboot the console. So after you reboot the PS4 and then go to run the PlayStation Vue application again, you can see that this time we no longer get that notification about being signed into PlayStation Network. So it just takes us straight into the menu, which is what we want. So yeah, this is pretty interesting stuff. We've got the config file here where we can, of course, adjust how things are loaded. So we can set it to auto load laps. Now, if you are on, 12.50, 12.52, 13.0, then you would auto load the poopsploit, maybe enable auto close and have the jailbreak behavior set to net control. And then, of course, if you're on 12.02 or lower, then you would auto load laps and set the jailbreak behavior to laps in order to set that up. Otherwise, you can just leave it on auto and it will figure out based on your firmware version which exploit to load. So that is the general idea. And when you go to load the laps exploit, it looks quite a bit different to loading the poops kernel exploit. You get this nice image here and it just loads perfectly without any issues. For the most part, the success rate on the laps exploit on firmwares 12.02 and lower is going to be very high, like 90+% probably, with the success to failure rate. So especially if you're somebody who is on an older firmware who did not have a working disk drive, so you haven't been able to actually, jailbreak higher firmwares above 11.0 yet, well, this is definitely the exploit for you. So you could go up to 12.02 or just stay on your current firmware and use this with the laps exploit, and it's very stable. However, if you're on 12.50, 12.52 or 13.0, of course, the poopsploit is a lot less stable. So it is going to take quite a few attempts to get it working and loaded on 12.50, 12.52 and 13.0. But yeah, still a pretty awesome exploit that has been released here. Big credits, of course, to UFM42, Cow-AR, Earth Onion, Hello Yanho, Gejine, D-Link Turtle, Dr. Yen Yen, The Flow, and ABC. So all of those contributed in some way to this. Of course, obviously the flow for the actual, poopsploit and ABC for the lapse kernel exploit, and then all of the other developers involved in making the PlayStation Vue exploit. And of course, I will make a full beginner's guide fairly soon. This is just the initial first look at this exploit, but once things have been streamlined a little bit, I will go ahead and make a full beginner's guide. But this is going to do it here for now. So hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And as always, I'll hopefully